You're locked in to the hottest station on the planet.
Resistance is futile. The revolution has begun.
You're listening to Rebelpreneur Radio, helping you break the rules and build the business you need for the life you want. And now, broadcasting his pirate signal
from somewhere beyond the status quo,
here's your host, best-selling author, marketing and media strategist, Ralph Brogden.
Hello and welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio. It's the show that helps you build the business you need so you can live the life you want. I'm Ralph Brogden. You know, conventional wisdom says build your business around the thing that you're passionate about. And for a lot of people, that's a mystery. It's a mystery to them what they are passionate about, but then how to take that business or that passion and turn it into a business that actually makes money while making a difference. That is that's a lost art. That's hard for people to do. We are really fortunate that today's guest has not only found something that she's passionate about, but she's doing an excellent job getting her message out into the world and making a tremendous difference in the lives of young people. Danielle Henderson is the founder and CEO of Kids Soul Speak. She is a passionate advocate for our youth all over the world, and she is driven to support their voices being heard. As an expert divorce coach, Danielle developed the therapeutic technique Inner Child Rescue, the life-shifting gift that heals our inner child. She also speaks in schools, colleges, universities, and businesses around the world and coaches families to unite, come together, and live in harmony. She is the author of Kids of Divorce, and we're really, really happy to have her today. Danielle Henderson, welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio.
Hi there, Ralph. Thank you so much. I'm delighted, honored, and thrilled to be on your show. It's very kind of you to invite me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share your passion and your vision with us. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in the area of helping children and kids of divorce. I guess that would be teens or children of all ages. What got you interested in that? What's your story?
Well, I mean, obviously started out in life as a kid myself and learned, like all children do, that their voices are often unheard as children, number one. But more so when children enter into families who break apart, separate, divorce, the children are very much at risk of really being permanently shut down on many levels emotionally that some never recover from. And you can prove that by looking at other adult children, grown-ups, who themselves gone through divorce experiences and how they have been so deeply affected. And so I'm just so passionate for our children, for our tweens, for our youth, to know that there is a safe place to come, that they can express themselves. They can talk about mum and dad in a positive way or a negative way, but feel it's okay, because when we do not release our pain inside and we go through life holding on to that, we're setting ourselves up as adults for more pain and potential failure. And you mentioned the inner child technique. This is such a beautiful, beautiful visual meditation that I do with children, tweens, teenagers, parents, grandparents, because the more that an older being can be released and heal their own inner child, the more they can then attend to our kids, tweens and teens. But sometimes adults aren't in that mindset where they're able or willing to connect on that level to their child, because a lot of us adults, we get caught up in our own lives and our own divorces and our own problems. And for me, I recognize that getting to a child younger, allowing them the introduction of meditation, imagination in a positive way, seeing themselves come through pain, to gain a pathway through that pain and having results come to themselves. You can't buy that. It's priceless.
You are the founder of Kids Soul Speak, and the idea behind this is a universal platform to give children around the world the chance to share their personal stories of change, loss, magic, healing, and beauty. How did the idea for that come about?
Well, I went through a really dreadful divorce myself. And I was in a different country, and my children were 4 and 5. And my husband and I decided that things weren't going to go, we weren't going to make old bones together. And the divorce, as many, was horrendous. And my children were so severely affected. And it really shocked me on more levels because I am a therapist. I'm also a qualified nursery nurse. And, I've studied so much as well as being a mother. And yet, as much as I tried to apply my mind to their needs, what they might be needing, I was so wrapped up and hurt in my own demise of my marriage that I recognized over time I was really dropping the ball on them. And I realized that they're carrying guilt and shame, as millions of children do, carrying guilt and shame that doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the parents. Here's a good example. I remember my daughter telling me when she was 6 that at the time me and her dad were separated, and I remember her crying and breaking down and just sobbing and saying, this separation is so difficult. This is even before the divorce. And then she says, I don't know what to say to you or my daddy. I think you don't like each other. I think this, I think that. And I realized that, the little ones and every age, this little one was in so much agony, like she was carrying guilt. She didn't know what to say to me or her dad. And that's so unfair and it's so wrong. But adults, we put that on our kids, consciously or unconsciously. And so I was really driven to create Kids Soul Speak. And my first book is Kids of Divorce. But it's not me as a therapist and mother saying this is what our children think. It's their actual stories. So I interview the youth, Ralph, and I ask them questions. It's like in the book with the little girl of 6, that little girl of 6 here. What's your relationship with your father like? And she says, when I was 6, I really adored my dad. I felt I was a real daddy's girl. We watched movies when we could, but he was scarcely home as his schedule would get in the way of family time. When my parents divorced, I didn't see much of him for the next 6 years. We Skyped and called, but I felt it didn't count as he wasn't there. I felt abandoned during that time. I was mad, like he wasn't there any longer. And I desperately wanted to be with him. After 6 years of barely talking, Dad got cancer, just as I joined the Girl Guides. So here's a little girl growing up without her father, desperately needing interaction, but there really wasn't that much for whatever reason. And then 2 major life events occur. She's about to join the Girl Guides. And in this little girl's life, it was a huge event. And then in a different country, her father has got cancer. And so this desperate tussle, this desperate angst occurs. And sadly, because her parents didn't carry or contend with the pain that she was carrying for those 6 years. And so, for my own story, when I recognized my own children were struggling and suffering, I decided that I would make Kids of Divorce my first book in an effort to bring the kids together and teenagers who had something to offer other kids out there who might be going through it. So that's really the main reason why I created it. And we're making a movie documentary, and there are some beautiful world leaders in that, but they're only in the film because they themselves started with a very hard, tricky childhood. It doesn't matter how famous you are or how wealthy you are. This is about love and compassion and love for self and love for others. And we are so lacking in those morals, in that way of thinking on so many levels, I feel, in the ways that we raise our children, and we expect they can just get over stuff, but they can't. They have tender hearts like us adults do.
And what is the goal? When we give kids a voice, I think that's important because, as you said, Danielle, so many children are just forgotten. They have no control. They have no input over what happens, and they're just kind of forgotten. So giving them a voice, is it to help adults to better understand them? Is it to help them to or help the children to express themselves in a way that is therapy, or is it all of the above, or what is it?
Yeah, it's all of the above. It's giving that kid the permission to say, I'm mad, I hurt. So at the end of every chapter, in my book, Kids of Divorce. Each child, the question is, what advice would you give to other children to help them get through their parents' divorce? Now, this is a story of a girl called Charlotte, who at 19 gave me her story. Her dad was a professor. He had an affair with a student, which is horrendous enough because it all came out in the public. The mother thought she had the best marriage in the world. This 19-year-old girl, Charlotte, has a brother who was older and away at college. So she's there left to contend with a mother who really went spiraling down. This girl came home from school one day. Her mother's trying on her teenage clothes. The mother got a boyfriend. The mother's behavior completely changed. She had a semi-breakdown, which a lot of people in divorce situation do, emotional breakdown. And at the end of her chapter, when she was asked, what advice would you give to other children to help them get through their parents' divorce? She said, I think that they have a right to be heard, that their voice is important, and what they are feeling and experiencing is no less significant than what their parents are going through. And should any of them be told, as I was, to say nothing, not to listen, but to find at least a few people they can talk to truly and safely and say anything to. They need to be supported. And that was the hardest part for me, said Charlotte. I did have my grandmother, but I needed some of my peers. I needed people my age that had been through it, so I would have had expression. It didn't need to be a secret. Why was it a secret? So my advice to kids, says Charlotte, is don't suppress your feelings. Do be heard. Express yourself, even if it's not what your parents want you to say or hear. But know that it is okay for you to have an opinion and be effective.
Very powerful words right from the person who is having to experience that. And that does give us a different perspective on it. It's not just about the parents and what the parents are going through. It's about what the kids are experiencing as well.
Yeah, it really is. And then I have another story here. So what I tried to do is I interviewed brothers and sisters in the same families, not all the way through, but like 4 or 5 different stories of these brothers and sisters, because we assume kids in the same divorced family are going to have the same experience. And it could not be further from the truth because we're all so different, right? We're all so different. So there's a story of a little guy whose mom and dad divorced. He lived in Italy. These kids are from all around the world. Lived in Italy, and this child was bullied at school before he left, but then they went to the north of Italy, so his accent was different, and he was mercilessly bullied, desperately missing his father, and he developed ADD and depression. And he was put on horrendous medications for years. And his fundamental core issue was the pain from his parents' divorce, being bullied at school. That wasn't recognized because his mom and dad were too busy fighting. So many different layers of pain that our children go through. So this little guy, Ricardo, is in the book. I think one of the more kind of biggest stories in the book is this young lady, Isabella from France, whose mother had a mental health issue. And that is one of the reasons why the dad left. But the sad thing was this little girl was only 3 and she was left in the house with her mentally ill mother. And this child endured years and years of horrendous pain because the mother's focus became the demise of her father. And the father went on, married someone else, had kids, and this poor child was, for example, one morning the mother burst in her room and she was 12 years old and said, "Get up. You're going to your father's," didn't allow her to dress into her school uniform, forced her out the house in her pajamas, didn't even let her carry her school books. There was no cell phone for her at this time. So she had to walk down a river alone early in the morning, all the way to her father's house. Thank God she made it safely. And it just wreaked such horrendous trauma in this young girl. And one of the questions I ask these kids in the book is, if you could say one thing to your mother about how she handled everything, what would it be? And Isabella said, "This is difficult for me to answer. I think she handled the whole situation dreadfully. I very often felt like I wasn't her daughter, but a tool that she had at her disposal to inflict pain and revenge on someone she had a very deep-rooted anger towards. But I also know her behavior was exasperated by her mental illness, and that when she was herself, she did the best that she could for my brother and me." So what you have in that paragraph there is a girl who's reaching into her pain and her agony of years of being left alone with this mentally ill mother. And yet now she's older, there's some kind of recourse where she can understand the mental illness was there. So there's a level of forgiveness. However, this little girl was left to fend for herself. And these are the children that we as a human race need to be looking out for, stepping in for, giving more help, more love, more guidance.
Absolutely. And you know, it's interesting because if these kids don't get help, then they grow up to be adults with issues who then bring that dysfunction and that trauma and that hurt into the next generation, and it just perpetuates itself in a vicious cycle, doesn't it?
It really, really does. One of the chapters in the book is called Do the Right Thing, because I really wanted to address exactly what you just said, Ralph, where if we don't heal our own selves as adults, then we're going to affect our kids long term. And so I wrote that all parents have a duty for their children to do what's right by them. You know, they signed up for this. There's no dodging it. If you're an aunt, uncle, grandparent, step parent, or influence in a child's life, then you have a responsibility to do right by them. In every case, your duty is not to inflict your personal opinions towards their mum or their dad. You know, the kids are going through enough. They don't need to hear Auntie Lily hates Daddy. You know what I mean? And so many people, because and those people being negative are projecting their own thoughts away from their own internal pain. So there's this massive kind of mix of mess that our children, tweens and teens have to deal with because the adults ahead of them haven't worked on their inner child, their inner selves, or separated themselves from their pain to focus on their children's. One of the big things about parents and young adult children is when our children get married. How many of our daughters and sons as adults have to worry and stress about where mum or dad is going to sit at the wedding, where mum and dad are going to be offended least or less? So we're still putting and inflicting pain on our young adult children as they're going into that what should be a beautiful phase of life. The young people believe in marriage. They want to make that commitment. But there's mum and dad arguing in the child's ear that's getting married, putting, external and internal pain on them. And these are the kind of things that need to be addressed. It's like, knock that off. We need to step up, and we really need to, separate our pain from, that of our spouse or our children. We need to be really attending to what matters in life.
That's so true. And when we watch a movie or a television show, they'll often take that situation you just described and they'll turn that into comedy or turn it into some kind of something for entertainment. But in real life, it's definitely not entertaining, and there's nothing funny about it. It does do great damage. If people are listening to this right now and they recognize some of the things that we're talking about, and they have not paid attention to their own kids, what are some things that you can recommend that they begin to do to begin to turn that around? How can we solve this problem?
Okay, well, there's many different ways to do it. And having lived through this myself, and then, like I say, mother, nursery nurse, therapist, family divorce coach, I would do things like this. So don't force your kids to split into two on their birthdays and Christmas. Quit that fighting. You can have 2 birthdays, you can have 2 Christmases, you can have 2 of whatever needs to be. They're like, I want to win this one, I want to win. But the kid's suffering. Make it an adventure. The kid gets 2 birthdays. Or if the parents can come together at that point, they get one with both parents, which is really what most children want. Switch each year around with your ex on your kid's birthday. Don't put pressure on them. And remember that their role is not to please friends or family. Parents, their role is to support, love, and help their children grow into mentally well, young adults. Another great tip that I have, and in the back of the book here, is great tips for parents. When I divorced and left with my children, we moved into a house on our own, and I could not look at a single photograph of my husband. I was so full of rage and pain and upset. And then my son one day said to me, Mummy, I want a picture of Daddy in my room. And my first instinct was, no way. And my second was, what on earth am I doing? This little boy is missing his father. He needs to see a picture. So we found this great photograph of my son and his dad, and I put it up on the wall, and that little boy would then wake up and see a picture of his dad every day, and it would make him feel safe. And what I noticed, once I got my own ego out of the way and he did this and he did that to me, I'd walk in his bedroom and I wouldn't even notice the photograph.
Interesting.
But it gave my child a message that it's okay to include daddy in my house or daddy in my room because mommy's okay with that. And it helped release some guilt and some pain. And I did the same for my daughter. We chose a picture of her and her dad that she loved. And so I learned by doing this, things that really bring light and ease to the journey of divorce within our children.
And that's really what it's all about. You might not be able to help or prevent or undo damage that was caused during the marriage, but you can at least treat your children the way they need to be treated and to love them, to respect them, to hear them, and not drag them into the mess that came out of the marriage. Don't compound the problem by dragging your kids down with you, I think is the biggest thing I take away from the conversation. And so very important because, wow, this is a problem all over the world. And speaking of which, you are working on several different things. You mentioned a documentary. We have a few minutes left. Tell us about that documentary.
Okay, yeah, the documentary is very exciting. And, we're looking at the school system and how we don't, engage our children in entrepreneurial thinking for themselves. We're still running an old education system that was created over 200 years ago that was to make human beings or children grow into human beings, rote, routine that would go into factories and work, enslavement. We're not teaching our kids a lot of subjects that actually are going to support them in life. We're not teaching them in school life skills. So we do address that. There's obviously a section for divorce, and some of the children in the Kids of Divorce book get to speak on camera about their chapter in the book. I have people in the movie like Stedman Graham, who I work with on another children's project. Stedman came from a very difficult background. He's married to Oprah Winfrey's life partner, very much his own man. He grew up in a family with 2 disabled brothers. It was really a hard life. He was in a very predominantly African American town. And so, he's in the book in the film telling his story a little and how he kind of got through that. Jack Canfield, who created Chicken Soup for the Soul books, sold over 100 million books. And the reason why he's in the book again is because in the documentary again is because of his own childhood and how he came through. So I want to give the kids, look, these guys are older, yes, but they came from where you're at. They came from something you may have experienced. So I want to give all the kids and teens a lot of, connections and communications. And then there's a lot of teenagers who are speaking to other kids in the documentary, saying about things they want to change in the world and, how they can lead in their communities. One of my young people, Draco, he started out at school at 10 years old with a kid coming up and saying, it doesn't matter how well you do in school, you're always going to be mowing my lawn. Isn't that dreadful? Like, he's a Mexican little boy. So this child he wasn't strong enough to beat anybody up. He endured beatings. And then he got to a certain age where he created Latino leadership in his school in Oceanside, California. And so he's in the film as somebody who traversed that trauma, but turned it into, something beautiful. And so I've got people like this in the documentary because I want to open millions and millions of windows in people's minds where they can say, you know what, I could do this. I could do this. So Kids Soul Speak, we also have a charity, 501(c)(3), so we get involved in different projects around the world and locally because it's nothing better than starting on your own doorstep, right?
Yes.
But what else? So I want to encourage people to think when they watch the documentary or they see the project we're doing in Uganda, to think, you know what, I could feed that family down the road for 6 months. I could pay for that family's children's lunches at school. So those children don't have to suffer humiliation every day when they haven't got a packed lunch, sandwiches. They can't afford to go into the dining hall. How about someone steps in and just gives that child some grace, allows that child's shame to be done? You know what I mean? So that's part of the documentary too. I get so passionate about it. I can't even calm myself down, Ralph.
That passion really comes through. And that's why I introduced you talking about building a business and building a message around something that you are passionate about, and your passion definitely comes through. We are speaking with Danielle Henderson, and the place you want to go to find out more is kidssoulspeak.com, kidssoulspeak.com. And we'll have that link on the Rebelpreneur website as well. Danielle, this has really been eye-opening, and I hope that it helps people to see that no matter what you're going through, if you have little ones involved, or even, teens or tweens involved, it affects them as well. And you need a plan, not just to get yourself through, but to ensure that your kids are not going to be traumatized unnecessarily as a result of the marriage and the divorce. So I think this is really, really absolutely timely and very important.
Oh my God. Especially now, because everyone's shut in. My thought, I would love, if I could, I would put this book, Kids of Divorce by Danielle Henderson, under the Kids Soul Speak brand, in the hand of every child and every parent that's going through this trauma. Because it's a short book. It's 11 short stories with tips to help the families traverse this journey. It's so needed. It's so important. So if nothing more, that they go to kidssoulspeak.com and get the book, Kids of Divorce. If they truly love their children and themselves, and they want to have a healthy, longer lifestyle, this book is so full of stories of kids, their own children's ages. Little girl got it last week, 10 years old, because there's a story of a 10-year-old in the book. That's how children can relate. Oh, there's a kid of 10. She's going through you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So yes, for definite. So much passion for that. And then, people out there can contact me direct. I can help them mediate with their families, traverse with their families this journey too. But like I say, if nothing else, get the book into the hands of grandparents, parents, children, teenagers, so they can relate, connect, and know they're not alone in this journey.
Excellent, excellent words of wisdom from Danielle Henderson. She is the founder and CEO of Kids Soul Speak, a universal platform for global youth to share their personal stories of change, loss, magic, healing, and beauty. Danielle speaks in schools, colleges, universities, and businesses around the world and coaches families to unite, come together, and live in harmony. To find out more, go to that website, kidssoulspeak.com. Danielle, thank you so much for taking time to share your passion with us. I really appreciate you being on Rebelpreneur Radio today.
Ralph, thank you a million. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. I appreciate the airtime, and I just want to send love to every child, every teen, and every adult listening out there.
You've been listening to Rebelpreneur Radio with Ralph Brogden. Download the show notes and much more at rebelpreneur.com.